So for this week, I've been looking at adding a six-pack to the front of the Lions overalls. And the reason I did this was just to make it seem a bit more animal-like, and make it a bit more interesting on the front rather than just plain overalls, and try and make it feel a bit more like a lion, um, rather than just someone in some overalls. And so how I did this was I made sure I had a reference, first of all, with me of what these muscles looked like, so I could try and replicate that rather than just going off what I thought it was in my head, because often there's a disconnect and it's not actually how you think it looks like. So it's really important to have a reference while you're doing these things to make sure you get it accurate and actually looks like what the things look like rather than what you think it looks like. So I started off using a fleecy fabric and I cut it into the overall shape of what all of them would look like together, and then I used some stuffing to start creating the shapes, and I sewed around each blob of the stuffing to kind of give it that 3D aspect of a muscle. And it was the most difficult part was trying to keep the fabric flat and not get tucks in it and get other parts of it caught, because there's quite a lot of material to contend with, and also when you're going round in a circle with something 3D, that can be quite difficult and quite fiddly. So I made sure to go slowly where I could and keep on checking that I was going in the right direction, everything was working. And then once I'd finished it with that fleece fabric, it didn't quite look right. I wasn't sure if it was because the material was different to the actual material of the overalls, so then I covered it with the same material as the whole overalls were made out of, to see if that matching would make it look more cohesive and more natural, because it is quite a strange thing maybe to have on a pair of overalls, so I wanted to try and make it feel a bit more natural to the costume. But I put it so the stripes were going across instead of up, um, just to just to make it a bit more obvious and slightly so you could see it better. As opposed to the stripes, it was more recognisable. And then the definition wasn't as great as it was with the fleece one, I think, because the fleece was lighter, so it was more obvious where the shadows were. So I went over it with the stitches more times to try and just make the dips deeper to make it more obvious and more easy to see. And then I used an eyeshadow palette to contour to try and make it more obvious. You see, it's if you look at a photo from before I did it, it was a lot flatter and harder to see and maybe got lost. So the adding the shadows and some highlights makes it easier to see, and for the distance that the audience will be sitting at, it will make it more visible to them, and it makes it much clearer. And for the edges, I just continued going round with stitches to try and keep it down, but also have that make it blend without blending, make it still feel a bit textured, a bit more liony. And I also made two straps to go over the top of the overalls to have it together. To do that, I just folded a piece in half and in half so that there wasn't any raw edges and they were all encased, so it was a nice neat strap. And I also added two loops to the front. I'm not sure about these yet, but the loop then has the strap go through it like that and then tied. The problem with that is we have this loose part, but it could be tucked in and maybe pinned or pop on, because I've probably in the quick changes they're not going to be untying each one and getting it off. They could just shrug the straps off, or I think Jo also suggested having a popper on here, on the top of the strap and the top to hold it on, which would mean we wouldn't have to undo these in every one, we just have to undo the popper. So it would be a lot easier to just pin this then in, so that flappy bit from the knot wouldn't be annoying. So that's something I'm going to think about and try later.